All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Dean Kelly Wentz-Hunter from the College of Science, Health, and Pharmacy. I just want to welcome everyone today. I just have a short announcement. I just wanted to remind all of the pre-med students that Dr. John Freeman has agreed to meet with you after the presentation today. So that's going to be in the auditorium here in 720. So it's just going to be when you go out of the Gons Hall here, you're just going to turn to your left, and it's at the end of the hall. So don't forget to go down there and meet with us afterwards. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, that was lame. Good afternoon, everyone. Institute Matthew Freeman Lecture and the American Dream Reconsidered Conference. It is always a great pleasure to introduce this lecture because it brings together both Roosevelt University's commitment to social justice and commemorates Matthew Freeman's dedication to the same cause. The generosity of the Freeman family not only makes this lecture possible, but also supports the amazing work happening in the College of Science, Health, and Pharmacy. And the Roosevelt community is deeply grateful for that. I'm delighted to be able to directly thank the Freeman family because many of them are here today. Dr. Kathy Kalam, if you raise your hand. Yeah. Dr. Maurice Lemon, all right, and Dr. Joshua Freeman, all right. Okay. Appropriately, for a family that has devoted so much of their time to the field of medicine, today's Matthew Freeman lecture will explore new and innovative approaches to treating brain tumors. We are fortunate to have Dr. Sudhana Jackson as our speaker. Dr. Jackson directs a research lab at the National Institute of Health and is performing cutting-edge research on treating tumors through pharmacological means. I will let Dr. Heather Damage, who is the director of the Mansfield Institute and a professor of sociology, tell us more about our guest. But before I turn the stage over to Dr. Damage, I want to offer a special welcome to all of our students looking to make the world a better place through mobilizing your education in health sciences. I hope you find inspiration from today's lecture. Thank you. Dr. Damage?
Thanks, Ali. So today is the 16th annual Matthew Freeman Lecture. The pandemic took a couple of years out, so it would be the 18th annual. Before I start, I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Kelly Wentz-Hunter and Melissa Hogan, the deans of Science, Health, and Pharmacy, for co-sponsoring the lecture this year and understanding the importance of centering social justice in all our work, in all the paths we choose. Also, thanks to Margie Rung and Andy Trees, two amazing colleagues. Thank you for making space for the Mansfield Institute and the Matthew Freeman Lecture this year. And thanks to Katura Brown for making sure that the lecture has slides. Appreciate you. And so a quick word on Matthew Freeman. He was a Roosevelt University student. He was my student. And I think about him often. It's been many years since we were in a classroom together and since he passed. He was a kind, warm, loving, funny, and so smart. He was a wonderful presence in the classroom. Often, we would catch each other's eye, and you know how you can do that with somebody? You kind of do that little smile, and you know what each other is thinking. I always knew when that happened that Matthew, who was 2 steps ahead, he was listening to whatever the conversation was going on, but I knew he had something percolating and he was going to drop a comment or a question that was going to ground social justice and humanity in our discussions. It's perhaps my most special memory of Matthew is that smile. And so I'm happy to be here today to commemorate and celebrate his life as every year through the Matthew Freeman Lecture. Our lecturer today, Dr. Sedana Jackson is a pediatric neuro-oncologist, a tenure-track investigator. She is the head of developmental therapeutics in the pharmaceutical unit. She is an NIH distinguished scholar. She is in the surgical neurological branch of the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Strokes. She is in the pediatric oncology branch of the National Cancer Institute. She is also in a leadership position for women and diversity for the Society of Neuro-Oncology, where she's done research on that society and published on that society. She remains the sole, this is 2022, the sole African-American pediatric neuro-oncologist in the United States. Her research aims to maximize therapies for prolonged survival in aggressive pediatric brain tumors. In 2021, she was awarded she was given an award at the NIH for her work in changes for racial equity. That same year, she received the 40 Under 40 award from Hampton University. In an op-ed this past spring, she elaborated on the work she's been engaged in around diversity and equity at the NIH since she joined there in 2015. She noticed the walls held portraits of people that all shared similar demographics, but did not share the attributes of the folks that were working at NIH. And so rather than having solely white male faces adorning all of the walls, she began a process of incorporating all sorts of faces representing all members of the community. Folks at NIH began to talk about how they finally felt seen. And for Dr. Jackson, she elaborates that the experience of being seen allows people to feel a close bond and relationship with a person or place. They can identify common ties and provide a foundation of belonging and togetherness that motivates positive interactions and potentiates constructive systemic changes. She sounds like a sociologist. I don't believe she's a neurologist. And I'll just say, as co-chair of our newly established DEI Office's Advisory Council and the director of the Mansfield Institute, I applaud this work. She is doing the scientific work and she is continuing to keep social justice centered. And I think what she shows us, both through direct mentoring, through her writing, her research, is that it's not an either-or way of living. You don't choose a career or you engage in social justice work. We bring social justice with us everywhere we go, into all the spaces we move. And so she is here to talk with us about her research and how she brings social justice with her everywhere that she goes. And I want to say one more thing, because this is so relevant to Roosevelt University. I think it's not surprising. She's an AKA, Alpha Kappa Alpha. And Eleanor Roosevelt was made an honorary member of AKA. So I feel like all of humanity is connected. So just one more space where we can see that connection. So thank you all for being here. We're hoping that there'll be time for Q&A. And students, I know that you need to get to your 2 o'clock classes on time. So we are aware that 1:45 you may start trickling out. So just so you know that and can feel comfortable with that. I now turn the mic over to Dr. Jackson.
I'm so excited to be here, you all. Okay, so let's get started so I don't make you late for your next class. So I am Dr. Sedana Jackson, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the blood, the brain, the barriers. So please, any and all of you who can identify with these statements, please raise your hand. So the very first statement is, who here is able to feel just an ease with playing instruments? Like they pick it up, they're able to just put their fingers on it, you understand? Anyone? Just comes easy. Thank you. And who here can identify with just having ease with keeping things organized, either in color or shape or size? Just you need that in your life to stay on point. And who here identifies with the ability to be able to make people feel comfortable around you? Just telling jokes, or just the ease with just, putting your hand out there, and just people feel comfortable when they come amongst you or you're in your presence. Thank you. So those are all commonalities that we all possess. There are innate qualities. Those are the things that we don't need to have been exposed to or have experience from, and we just have it, just as we were born, just things that create us and have us be us. So I wanted you to recognize that not all of us raised our hand for all three or even any of them, but there are commonalities amongst us that we're born with that are innate qualities. And so today I have the pleasure of talking to you about things that are innate to me, that are running through my blood and have been running through my blood ever since I was born, from family and passed down, and then things experiments, and hope to keep you engaged in that. So first, this, and you'll see a lot of pictures. I'm a visual learner, so I always will show pictures. But there's a lot of blood, sweat, and guts between dreams and success. And what this quote didn't include were tears, because I've gone through a lot of different tears to be able to get to where I am today. So I start this out with an additional quote about curiosity. And if you light the spark of curiosity in a child, they will learn without any further assistance. And so that's me as a 6-7-year-old, loving bumblebees, because you can see this nice yellow and black sweater. But just with all the curiosity in the world, always asking a million questions of my parents and my teachers, and just ready, always willing to learn. And I put that picture up because that was my innate quality, just curiosity, even to the point where my parents named me. My name is Sadhna. It's a Sanskrit Indian name, meaning the one who searches for light and truth or devotion. So that, in and of itself, the name, like they knew that I was just going to be always searching for the light, always searching for what comes next. And so that is something that runs through the course of my veins and is innate to me. And in that same curiosity, I applied for various scholarships when I was in high school, and definitely as a senior, one of them being this NIH undergraduate scholarship program, or UGSP. So this UGSP program was unique in the fact that they would pay for the amount of years of me needing money to go to whatever college or university I wanted to go to, but I was required to give back and work at the NIH after I graduated from college. So it was a very long, drawn-out application. I cried not wanting to even apply because I had not gotten some other scholarships, and my mom was like, we'll sit down, we'll apply for it, and I got it. And it was great because I had the scholarship for 2 years. It allowed me to go to Hampton University, where I received a family members and my friends, and I was like, cancer's in the news. Let me try to find the cure for cancer. That's what they always talk about, the cure for cancer, like it's one cure for all cancers. And so I was excited about that. And so I took that love of science and research and passion and then went to medical school at Eastern Virginia Medical School in Norfolk, Virginia, which was maybe like 15, 20 minutes away from Hampton University. It was a great school because we had a lot of outreach and community service, and I was able to volunteer at local shelters and volunteer at local soup kitchens, and just really understanding the need to be able to give back to the community. And with that cancer research and love of science and medicine, I said, you know what? I'm going to take my talents and become a pediatrician. I think that kids are super cute and that they would love to be able to potentially laugh at my corny jokes and me just be able to love up on them and make sure that they are healing well. And so then I took my talents to, Orlando, Florida, where I did a pediatric residency. So that was 3 years in Orlando. So the best place on earth is Disney World. So we saw a lot of patients, international patients, and a lot of different diseases that we would not have seen had we not trained at Orlando at Arnold Palmer Children's Hospital. So I was grateful for that experience to be in Disney World, see all these people from all these different countries who happened to get sick at the Disney park. And then we were able to see things that we wouldn't normally see had they not been visiting and got sick. From there, I said, you know what? Because of my love of cancer research, because I love taking care of children, I want to become more specialized and I want to become an oncologist. So that had me to do an additional 3 years of training at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. So stop doing all the counting to try to figure out how old I am. I'm just old, okay? But so 3 additional years in Memphis, Tennessee. I ate so well. The weather was so hot, but it was nice and warm, and we just had a good time. Sadly, I saw what it was like to take care of a dying patient from when they were well to when they were sick to when they were well again and then sick again. So I got to see that cyclical change, and I was able to pour into my patients, and they were able to pour into me as well as their families. And then from there, I went to Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland, because I was not only interested in children who had cancer, but I was interested in children who had brain tumors. So this whole long trajectory brought me then back to the NIH. And why back to the NIH? Because I had that scholarship when I was 17, and then I wound up at the National Institutes of Health. So I always say that the job I have now, I got it when I was 17 years of age. So weird that you can have a very long application process, interview process, and then acceptance process to a job. But a very interesting place to work. So this institution is actually, they call it National Institutes of Health, because it's a collection of 27 institutes and centers. So I work at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, as well as the National Cancer Institute. The National Cancer Institute is the largest institute of all the 27. But basically, this collection of buildings and institutes came about in 1887 as a way, just a one-room place, as a way to really bring about change in the clinical sense and research. And so that has expanded over all of these years, but the main focus is really on the health and the longevity of human beings. And so how I describe NIH to people is everybody who comes through the walls or comes through the halls of NIH is either part of a clinical trial or wants to be a part of a clinical trial. So we do 100% of research. NIH is also unique, and you've probably heard of it, because they put out money towards different academic institutions to be able to, within grants, to be able to fund research outside of the NIH. So you have people like myself who work there and do research and take care of patients and do administration type work, but then you also have the NIH that gives money to other institutions. So in me being able to go through that long cascade of time and you not knowing how old I am, there are all these different mentors and sponsors that allowed me to be where I am today. So I'm very grateful for many of these sponsors and mentors that are on this slide. So they helped usher me throughout medical school or residency or fellowships. And I need to tell you what the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. So a mentor is there to help you say, oh, maybe you should apply here, maybe you should apply there. Let me look over your application. This looks good. A sponsor goes that additional step. And when you're not in that room and when you're not in that conference, they bring up your name. They talk about you. They talk you up. They have other people consider asking you to come speak at places where they wouldn't even have thought of you on their roster. So it's important for you to know that you'll have both sponsors and mentors in your whole time of your life. And sometimes you can push a mentor to become a sponsor, but if you identify whether or not this person is a mentor or a sponsor for you, then you fully realize how you can utilize their services long term. I learned that a little bit later in the game, but I just wanted you all to know that you're going to have both, and that you need to utilize them to your best potential and think about how they can help you, but also how you can help them. And in that regard, you can see that there's some homogeneity of who's on this slide, of the white hair, of the white-hued skin. And some of that, a lot, comes from the fact that as physicians, there is a lot of homogeneity in who are the clinicians that are treating our patients. So the predominance is white males, the predominance is Asian males. And so the rest of the pie, as you can see, is taken up from other either unknown or lower or underrepresented groups. So myself, I identify as Black African American. Specifically, there are only 2% of Black females that are physicians. So as you're sitting in your seats now, you're listening to the only Black pediatric neuro-oncologist in all of the US. So I'm like 0.005 of the point. It's tiring, you guys. And I love it. So I say that to say that while you saw the white hair of the mentors and the sponsors in the previous slide, it's also my friends that stand for and are my mentors and sponsor, and I'm mentors and sponsors for them. So the people that you're sitting next to may be an even better sponsor or mentor than you could ever imagine somebody with white or gray hair to be for you, because I have written recommendation letters, I have written award applications for my colleagues at the NIH and beyond so that we can become better together and we can make that pie more equitable that I just showed in the previous slide. So just recognize that it doesn't need to look homogeneous for your mentorship or your sponsorship. So lift others up that are your same age and that's your same colleagues, and that's important to state. So, the blood, the brain. So now's the science time. So anybody who's interested in med and science, perk up. And people who aren't, I'm gonna try to make it as interesting as I can. So fill your brain with giant dreams so it has no space for petty pursuits, which is easier said than done because sometimes being petty is fun, you know? That's honest. So, interesting enough, so I said that I'm a pediatrician, so I deal with children, and sometimes children get brain tumors. And one of the brain tumors that children get is called glioblastoma. Glioblastoma is a very aggressive type tumor. These are the patients where they can get diagnosed in the beginning of the year and they're gone by the end of the year, just because this tumor is just so aggressive. So we provide so many treatments for these patients where we have surgery, so the neurosurgeon goes in and takes out the tumor. We provide radiation therapy, that's a radiation oncologist beaming radiation therapy to that tumor to kill that tumor. And then I, as the oncologist, will make sure that they receive therapy that's directed to the cancer that kills the cancer. And so despite all three of those very aggressive type treatments, the treatment survival curve is very, very low. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about this survival, but basically 2 years after the patients are diagnosed, you can see from this curve, I don't have a pointer, doc. Okay. Right on cue. Okay, where am I pointing? Here. Okay, so right here, you'll see by 24 months, about 50% of these patients are still alive, despite whatever therapy we're throwing at them, the kitchen sink and all. So we really have not done that great of a job in children who have glioblastoma or even adults. So we have a lot more work to do. And one of the reasons for why these tumors are so aggressive is because these tumor cells are so smart. Cancer is super smart. So when you hear people saying, we're gonna find the cure for cancer, we are all very hopeful and very optimistic, and there's not one treatment for all cancers. So these tumors specifically grow really quickly. Not all the tumor cells grow and act alike, and they're sneaky. They hide behind the blood-brain barrier. So like a double entendre of my talk, and my research deals with blood-brain barrier. So what is the blood-brain barrier? The blood-brain barrier is a collection of cells that allows or doesn't allow certain agents from getting in. So if you look at these pictures, so an intact blood-brain barrier. So all of us sitting in this room have an intact blood-brain barrier right now. Okay, except for the ones that are asleep. So when you go to sleep, your blood-brain barrier gets a little bit loosey, a little bit more permeable. So just wake up right now so you can just, agree with the fact that we all have an intact blood-brain barrier. So these small little blue molecules are the drugs. So when we give an agent by mouth or we give an agent through our veins, then the drug is staying in the blood vessel here. And so this brain is made up of a lot of different cells, but these last three cells, the astrocytes, the pericytes, and the endothelial cells, work to make an intact blood-brain barrier. Now, in the context of us having, our patients having glioblastoma or glioma cells, those are these orange or peach color cells, there's a lot of disruption amongst the blood-brain barrier. So in those areas, we do get a lot of the drug to be able to kill these ugly tumor cells. So that's good. So you say, well, what's the problem if it's the BBB is disrupted? Well, easier said than done. So as you look at the tumor, if you look at the core of the tumor, the core has a very permeable or disrupted BBB. But as you go further and further away from the core or the central part of the tumor, the BBB becomes less permeable and looks more like the BBB of you and I. So while we do a great job of resecting or cutting out the tumor that's in the core and sometimes the peritumoral area, when we have the neurosurgeon to do that, we do a horrible job of treating this area. So what becomes an issue is 6 to 12 months after we've thrown the kitchen sink at this peritumoral and central tumor area, this distal site becomes a problem and these tumor cells start to grow, and because they've been sneaky before, then they know how to evade our future therapies, and it just becomes an issue. So really our research in the lab and in the clinical setting is how can we transiently or for a short period of time open the BBB to have it look more permeable, just like the central tumor area, so that the very first pass of us being able to give any therapies, this distal area looks very much like the central area. And then over time, it goes back to normal, just like you or I, because we don't want to cause more problem of bleeding and infection and headache and all of that. So I was going to talk to you today about just one of the studies that we've completed when we've looked at both clinical research and laboratory research to really understand the BBB in glioma cells. So one of the very first projects I completed when I was at the NIH, now I'm still there, is that we looked at this drug called regadenoson. Regadenoson is an FDA-approved cardiac stress drug. So if you think about it, if you go to the doctor and you say, Doc, I'm having some chest pain, what should I do? The doctor would write for you to get a cardiac stress test because he or she would want to see if you have some blockage of the vessels around your heart. So if for some reason you weren't able to walk on a treadmill and do a standard cardiac stress test, you'd get this drug, regadenoson. And regadenoson would make you feel as if you just walked or ran on the treadmill so that you can see if there were any blockage around the heart. Well, interesting enough, this FDA-approved drug actually causes 26% of patients to have a headache after they get it. And so that made some researchers in Cornell think about, well, if this is causing vasodilation and headaches, maybe the vasodilation causes increased permeability of the BBB. So this group out of Cornell looked at mice and rats, just normal brain, no brain tumor, no disease in their brain, and they just wanted to know, could we get more of this large sugar drug into the brain of these mice and rats if we gave regadenoson with the sugar? So they actually found that with one-time dose of regadenoson or 3 times the dose of regadenoson, they could see increased concentration of this dextran sugar within the brain. And they saw it within less than 60 minutes, so around 30 to 40 minutes of time, they saw increased concentration in the brain. So we said, we don't care about getting sugar in the brain. What if we could get more chemotherapy in the brain? So the main chemotherapy agent we use for brain cancer in adults is called temozolomide. Because it's a long name, we shorten it down to TMZ. But not the TMZ that has to do with pop culture and that, was it Levine? Whatever. The guy talking about gossip and petty pursuits. But we call it TMZ. So we gave rats that did not have brain tumor TMZ with regadenoson, and we wanted to know, could we get more TMZ into the brain? Like we need more TMZ, right? And what we found is when we looked in plasma, which is the blood or the systemic concentration, we didn't see any increase, which is good. We don't want more chemotherapy in the rest of the body. We just really want it in the brain. So trust me in looking at these graphs that when we saw 2 hours after giving either the combo or temozolomide alone, we saw no increase. Again, we don't want more increase in the body. But when we looked in the brain, we actually saw a 60% increase in these rats who did not have brain tumor, and we saw that they had more TMZ with regadenoson, but we only saw it 2 hours after. 6 hours after, it did not have increase. Again, that was good because we only wanted it to be transient. We wanted a short period of time where we could get more TMZ in the brain with regadenoson and then have it go back to normal. So we're like, shoot, if we can do this with rats that don't have brain tumors, that have an intact blood-brain barrier, why could we not do this with patients who have brain tumors? And lo and behold, we started a trial at the NIH and at Johns Hopkins where we use this cool tool called microdialysis. Microdialysis is a means to be able to measure how much drug is in the brain. So using this plastic tubing, we ask the neurosurgeon, after he or she takes out the core of the tumor and some of the peritumoral area, we ask, can you please put in this plastic tubing so that we can measure how much temozolomide concentration is in the tumor? And then we can also have the clinical team to measure how much of temozolomide is in the blood or the plasma. So then we can measure how much is in the brain and then how much is in the rest of the body. So we just wanted to look at 5 total patients, and just in the scheme of things, on day 0, we had the patient to get surgery, so they had that tumor retaken out, and then they had the catheter placed. And then 1 day after surgery, they took oral temozolomide, so they took it by mouth, and then we were able to measure temozolomide in the brain and in the blood. And then 2 days after surgery, they were given temozolomide again, and then the cardiologist gave them regadenoson. And so they got a cardiac stress test 2 days after surgery. So I was at the bedside like looking like, oh, I'm having a cardiac stress test. We had them go through surgery, and now they have to deal with a cardiac stress test. And then they had the catheter removed on day 3, right at the bedside. They didn't have to go back to the operating room. So what we found is that when the neurosurgeon placed these tips, I guess you can't see these very well, but basically it's just to show that we had, for some patients, this is just 3 out of the 5 patients that we looked at, we saw that the catheters were either placed in a BBB closed area, so that's non-contrast enhancing. That means when an MRI was done, we saw no kind of bright spot. And that means that the bright contrast agent wasn't able to get to disrupted BBB. So in some patients, we were able to put 2 catheters, one in BBB closed and one in BBB open. In other patients, we were only able to put 1 in BBB closed. So this is just a picture of that. So do you think regadenoson worked? If it did, I probably would be doing, like somersaults with Fauci and, So just like science, some things work and some things don't, and there's something to be learned for when it doesn't work. So of the 5 patients, only 2 of the patients actually did show this higher, what we call area under the curve, or AUC, and it's just the amount of concentration over time. So we looked at hours 0 to 24 of when they received either temozolomide alone or temozolomide with regadenoson. Patients 2 and patients 5 had increase, but not that 60% like what we saw in those rats. So we were like, not really, I still had a job, but you want to be able to say that you're providing some benefit and effect to your patients, and the facts are the facts. And so what we learned from this study was that not only was there no increase in each individual patient, but we also didn't see an increase when we looked at the BBB closed versus the BBB open, just thinking that maybe in the 2 different regions where you have kind of like the central tumor versus the distal tumor, we didn't see any difference with the regadenoson either. And that's here in this red line with the combo. So in summary, there was no significant difference in plasma or the systemic concentration of regadenoson, which is good because we didn't want more effect to like the red blood cells and the white blood cells. So it didn't have an effect on that, but it didn't have that increased 60% that what we would thought we would have in those rats. And in patients 2 and 5, where we did see an increase, those patients actually did have headaches. So it made us think, well, maybe that's the biomarker. Maybe in the patients who it's going to work, those 26% of patients who do get headaches when they get this medication, maybe those are the patients that really are going to be the most responsive to regadenoson or a drug like regadenoson. Additionally, one of the other questions we had was, well, maybe it's just the dosing. So the dosing that we used was the standard cardiac stress dosing. But if you can recall from the Cornell study, they used either a one-time dose of regadenoson, and it was a lower dose, or 3 times triple dosing. So there's already studies ongoing at Johns Hopkins where they're looking at maybe it's the dosing, maybe we need to do lower dose or even higher dose than the cardiac stress testing dose to really affect the brain or patients who have brain tumors. So I'm talking with my previous mentors about those studies to see what we can learn for the future. So there's something always to be gained when you have positive and negative and questionable results. And you always want to say a successful clinical trial and even scientific experiments in the lab are a success when you come out with more questions than when you started with. And we have a lot more questions. And then lastly, the barriers. So remember that problems are always just solutions in progress. So this is actually my quote. I didn't trademark it yet, but my husband and I, we were looking and we were like, this is my statement. He was like, are you sure this is your statement? And then we Google searched it and nobody had said it before. So it's definitely mine. So don't you guys try to trademark it after today. It's definitely mine, okay? I just got to get my monies together so I can trademark it. But just think of problems as solutions in progress. You're like, what am I going to do? And like, there is a thought. Somebody has already solved this, or somebody hasn't already solved it. There's in some mechanism or way about doing so. So I start this section talking about my family, how much I love my family, how my family is my support, and in no way my barrier. If anything, just the opposite. And so I'm excited to be able to stand in front of you all today with my family, just utmost support of me, family that I was born with, family that I married into. I lost my mother last year to metastatic breast cancer, so you can see she's in 2 pictures, one in a picture and one in actual physical form. So that's when art meets life and life meets art. So that has been a very hard, it's hard being a child and a patient and being able to be a support system for her. But knowing that I continue to go forward as a cancer researcher, as somebody who needs to be a change agent for this world in cancer research and beyond. In addition to being here and having an awesome support system of my family, I also have support system of my other advocacy and society groups. So Dr. Dalmage talked about how I'm a part of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and how there are other organizations, both in my society, like work professional groups and otherwise. And we all serve as each other's community, and we spur each other to be better and to do better. And so in that context of being better and doing better, it had me to sit down with about 10 other NIH staff during 2020 to think about what changes needed to come about at the NIH so that we were in a more inclusive and more warming environment to work in, either at home or coming into the office. And we started to think of some changes that needed to come about so that everybody was in an equitable space. And interesting enough, it came about, of course, at a time where everyone was sitting at home and seeing this injustice. So if you wouldn't mind to please just take a moment of silence to think about all the conversations that came about from these martyrs that had to die from all of this turmoil, these discussions, the livelihood, the families that were affected by these deaths, and even more that aren't on this screen, to the fact that we have more diversity officers, inclusion and equity talks, and being able to think about how we can make this place just so much easier and more warm and comforting for everyone. So at the NIH, about 10 of us came together and we said, what can we do to make this place better? We're not in the DAI space. We're not experts. We were scientists, non-scientists, administrators. And we said there are changes that need to come about. But this wasn't the first time that staff at the NIH had actually asked for change. So these are pictures of 1993, when actual Black staff at the NIH asked the then director, Dr. Healy, to make changes at the NIH because discrimination and biases were prevalent. People were being discriminated against, people were being fired, opportunities weren't being equitably achieved across staff. In addition, all the way spanning into 2011 to now, there's been a large gap in who receives funding. So of course, NIH is important for being able to give out funds to all these different academic centers. Well, who's getting the funding is not equitable. So this graph shows who gets the majority of funding are white grantees, but the Black grantees and Hispanic grantees are not high. And so that becomes a problem when NIH is giving out funding. Well, why is it not equitable? And how do we go about ensuring change? So in the summer of 2020, 10 of us put out an open letter to then NIH Director Francis Collins. We were scared. We didn't think we were going to have a job after we put this letter out. We emailed it to him. We asked our mentors and sponsors to also send the email to him of this is the letter asking for change. And so us as a self-assembled group called 8 Changes for Racial Equity, or ACRE, as a nod to 40 acres and a mule asking to give back for slaves and reparations, we outlined 8 changes that the NIH could make to make this place more equitable, inclusive, and diverse, with one being publicly and explicitly identify diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism as top NIH priorities, track and publicly report NIH workforce diversity data annually, improve representation of Black, Indigenous, and Latinx individuals in the NIH community, implement an annual workplace climate survey to address all forms of harassment and discrimination, develop required anti-racism and anti-discrimination training for all NIH employees, require and incentivize leadership to be active participants in NIH diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, implement a wage equity plan, and rebrand the current harassment initiative to not just be harassment does not work here, but racism, discrimination, and harassment don't work here. So just as a flash forward, I still have a job. I still work at the NIH, but we were like biting our nails. I was like, oh, okay, I'm a physician. I could probably find something at the local hospital. You know, if this doesn't work out, I still have 2 children and a husband. But it was received very well. So Francis Collins started to come out in the news sectors. He heard us, he heard other underrepresented staff, and he said, you know what? NIH does have a history of supporting and turning a blind eye to structural racism and to discrimination. And so he said, we're going to do better. And as a result of him saying, we're going to do better, they created this initiative called the Unite Initiative. Now, with every great initiative, it's an acronym. So U is understanding what's going on internally and externally. N is about new opportunities for health disparities research. I is for what's going on internally, how can we help the workplace staff. T, I'm a co-chair for that, and it's around communication and transparency of all these efforts. And E is around what's going on in the external sphere and who are we providing grants to and how can we make it a more equitable process. So it energized us that we helped to catalyze this change at NIH that was way past needed, but us speaking up and writing an open letter and motivating each other, like, we can do this, we can send this in, we can maybe still have a job after it was said and done, to then Francis Collins saying publicly, we need and we ought to, and then creating this initiative and these committees to do better. So what you'll find is a lot of times when you speak up, you don't just get to speak up and then just slurk away. So I spoke up and I said, one of the things we can change is all this artwork. It looks just really homogeneous. It looks like my slide of all my mentors and sponsors, the very first slide. And so as a result, because I spoke up, something comes from it. So I have a short little video. Hopefully it'll play. There's no audio. Oh. There we go. I'm gonna get out of the way. My name is Dr. Sedana Jackson, and it is my pleasure today to welcome you to the Unite Recognition Project. It is a way for us to see the diversity of the NIH staff, to be able to enhance the inclusivity and belonging amongst NIH, to help with retention and recruitment. So I welcome you to look at all the images that are displayed across the NIH main Bethesda campus and beyond. We're starting this first phase in Building 1, 10, and 31. The recognition project began with after these town halls and listening sessions after the murder of George Floyd. So people started to raise concerns and questions about how NIH was going to play a role in racial equity. And so one of the questions and thoughts that I raised was, how are we going to diversify the halls and walls of the NIH? We're seeing a predominance of older white males on these halls. And really that doesn't increase the feeling of belonging and wanting to be here, and inclusivity amongst trainees, amongst contractors, amongst staff. So this is an ode to the great people that work here at the NIH, who are passionate about all the mission of NIH, and to really just showcase the diversity. Welcome to the Recognition Project.
Sedana, I really appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this by you and your team, and I am really interested to see what it looks like.
Let's go.
We brought the senior leadership here to have a look.
Yes. So it starts out with UNITE, specifically all the names of the committees that help to
Nice.
Oh, great.
put out all the racial equity efforts at the NIH, so that we can be a nod to the extramural community.
Okay, is there a significance to the color that is chosen for each of the letters, or is that just sort of artistic liberty?
So I'm going to have our medical artists go into detail about that as we show our portraiture.
Okay, very good. So this is fantastic, and I'm interested to hear all about how you took what was presumably a photograph and turned it into this really eye-catching artwork. So, artist, speak to us.
So one of the things we wanted to do, we wanted to highlight all the different aspects of the NIH community. We have researchers and doctors. We also have research support staff, designers, everybody else, and we wanted to put them all throughout NIH. So with that, we got a lot of different styles, different types of pictures, and we wanted to make each and every one of them have the same feel, the same quality to them. And so we used the NIH colors. We used a lot of overlapping patterns, and we wanted to just really showcase all the brightness and all the diversity of NIH.
Well, you seem to have captured it here. How did you figure out which people to highlight? Because we obviously have a big place.
Oh, yes.
Were there a lot of candidates saying, pick me, or?
So just the opposite.
Really?
I've had to advertise for people to really have themselves be included in this recognition project. So it was decided by committee. I asked people to submit pictures. We also looked at both selfies and just high resolution pictures of NIH staff. And so we were able to then give to the medical art team, specifically senior medical artist Jeffrey, and then he came up with this great design, and so we said, let's go.
And hopefully, as people see that we're going to treat them well, we get more and more photos and volunteers coming in.
Exactly.
I think the beauty of this is it shows all the faces of NIH, and people don't necessarily think about all of those faces in the way that it's represented here. It's fabulous.
Yeah, that was one of the things we really wanted to do on this. I mean, NIH is a wonderful community, and there are so many people who work here and so many people who have dedicated their lives that we just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Yeah.
Well,
So
this
please-
is a great start here. Sedana, you
Well-
look pretty good.
Thank you.
And without a mask, I guess you don't have to wear a mask for your portrait.
No.
No.
So in addition to pictures, we also utilize quotes from various celebrities and NIH staff members to really capture the essence and passion of NIH. And that diversity matters, representation matters, and that we're all about racial equity at the NIH.
So who chose the quotes?
So
Did people-
again, it was
people
done by
just-
committee. It was done by committee.
Right, that's great.
So we looked through, we actually scoured the internet and the interwebs for various quotes of famous and non-famous people. And then we utilized our NIH library to check the sources and make sure that people said
That's
what they
good, because
said.
half the time it turns out, nope, didn't happen.
Exactly. So we got a diversity of quotes, and we have that interspersed amongst the portraiture.
Oh, that's great.
I like
That's a
this. So
good
to
one.
bring to your own attention how you might be an oppressor and how you could change to the other side, become a liberator.
Right.
That's what we want to do.
Right.
That's great.
I like that.
We have some Unite members, committee
Oh,
members.
wonderful.
Unite co-chairs, Erica Boone, who's an E co-chair.
No, so this, this is
Since he's
on the, what we would call the infrastructure side, is responsible head for us dealing with all our property. And so, what I like about this is I was looking at some of the earlier ones that you got tenure track investigators, you got the scientific side. This would be on more the administrative infrastructure side. That's great
That's
to
great.
represent all facets of the NIH.
Oh,
So I'm
great.
glad we
Another
capture that
aspect
in
of
this.
diversity.
Yep.
Yes.
That's excellent.
And this is just the beginning of so much more portraiture change amongst the NIH.
There's Karen. Okay, fantastic. And presumably, everybody reviewed their,
So majority of the images, specifically Karen, came from her professional NIH headshot.
I see.
But I did let everybody know who was a part to say, hey, you were selected for inclusion in the recognition project.
Wonderful.
I'm glad to see John Lewis on the wall
yes.
here.
Yes,
Oh, right.
yes.
John Lewis and James Baldwin were up,
James
and those
Baldwin over
two
there.
personally were ones I was really proud to see be a part of this.
And
Yeah.
totally agree.
That's great.
Had the privilege of knowing John Lewis.
Yeah.
And I miss that guy.
Francis, we've got John Tisdale.
That's fantastic.
Great.
So John Tisdale is a personal mentor of mine and just an overall great scientist and a great ally. So I knew that he needed to be included in this first installation.
That's
I
great.
love it.
Good choice.
That is
Good
great.
choice.
And this Baldwin quote we should state every time we have a Unite meeting.
Oh, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, now I know this guy because I hired him when he came to NIH at NIDCR.
Okay.
That's Jimmy, yeah. He's
Yeah.
now the head of budget at NIDCR.
So his boss wrote an email because his boss walked down these halls and he said, Jimmy, I see you on the hallway. I'm so excited.
great.
This is a great representation of the diversity of our staff. So that gave me a little bit of glowing in my heart. That
Yeah, that's
it's
great.
already getting so much glowing
that's good.
recognition.
Yeah, he was an entry analyst when I brought him into NIDCR.
No kidding.
A while ago, but that's great. Oh, and there's another friend.
We have a very small indigenous American population that works here at the NIH, so important to really highlight that.
Yes.
And David
Indeed.
Wilson is really pro-indigenous American
Indeed.
representation. so.
Yeah, indeed. He's doing great work with tribal nations all over.
We need more of that too. There's
Showcase
another place.
Michelle Boyle.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So Michelle is a great way for us to really show in terms of racial equity as a trans woman, as well as Karen, to talk about the plight of LGBTQ community and how important it is for diversity of thought at the NIH.
Yeah. Oh, another excellent choice.
That's my friend Jane.
Do you personally know Jane?
Oh, really well. We've been really good friends for about 10 years, and she's one special person, that's for sure. And she's fearless.
So we needed to make sure she stayed on the wall. as
Oh,
well.
yeah, I'm really glad to see that. You know, I'm going to take a picture and send it to her so she'll know that she's being represented here. She'll be very touched and
She will,
appreciative of
yeah.
that.
So these initial exhibits are representing current NIH staff, and so it's of various facets. But future representations will be people who have poured into the NIH or been funded by the NIH.
Oh, great.
But we wanted to first highlight the people who blood, sweat, and tears put their time and energy and love into the NIH.
No question.
So tech transfer office
Yeah.
is very important for
Yeah.
transfer of materials and intelligence.
We just had a
We just had a
tough phone call about that this morning.
Right.
And I see we have Obama on the wall here. This is good.
Had to include him.
Oh, that's a great quote from.
And we have a lot of firsts on these walls. Barack Obama is the first black male president of the United States.
This is John
Interesting.
Pham,
Okay.
editor of Cell, who's been a good ally for us.
He has been.
He published, of course,
Right.
the United
Yeah,
paper,
yeah.
and he really was very interested and very supportive of letting that happen.
So Lauren is one of the people I haven't met in person yet.
She's a senior investigator in NINDS,
Yeah,
great
yeah.
ally.
Yeah, great.
So Javier Del Rivero is a physician scientist within NCI. Specialty is endocrinology, oncology, so very budding,
Fantastic.
great work.
Great.
And again, getting all these different types
I
of
like the
jobs.
quote from Ann
From
Solomon.
Ann.
So
Yeah.
Ann
Ann,
Hunter
yes.
is a
Oh,
senior
yes.
scientist
Yes.
here.
We
She
all
was
know
happy to
Ann.
contribute.
Yes.
She's actually going to be part more of the digital campaign, her picture, which you probably could see over here on this. But she donated this very great quote. At the National Institutes of Health, Hope, and Humanity, all are welcome in our ranks and who we serve.
Yeah.
That's great.
And we purposely had this be part of the opening when people come in and when people leave, so they can read this and be inspired throughout the rest of the day.
Well
Yeah, we've
positioned.
done National Institutes of Hope, but she's added humanity. I
Yes.
like that.
Yeah, that's great.
So we have additional quotes that will be around the NIH and in the digital campaign here. So to be able to have people as they walk by or stand still,
She's
really
already
be able to
coming
see
from
all the
here.
great quotes and feel inspired as they sip their coffee in the atrium. These images will be interspersed with other announcements about the NIH.
And you're going to rotate through these
They will
and
rotate.
put other quotes as you
Yes.
come across?
So that's Ann
nice.
Sumner, yes.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, this is fabulous. We have to have it on the website so the whole world
Yes.
can see.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
No, this is great.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
For me, it was such an honor to work on this. I know that is a passion project for many people, and for me to be included, it made me feel such a bigger part of this NIH community. It allowed me to represent people who I don't see every day, but I know who come into work putting their lives and dedication into everything they do. We work hard to help the American people, and sometimes is forgotten with the huge monolith that is NIH, all of the hundreds and thousands of people who have dedicated their lives to making this country better.
So that was a lot in a short period of time, but this is the last slide. And so I just wanted you to be able to come and take away to embrace the commonalities that all of us have and the differences. So we saw that when we raised our hand or when we didn't raise our hand. Remember, it's both challenging, rewarding, blood, sweat, tears, guts, everything else. In order to be committed to your dreams and to your goals, that's very important. And then lastly, just remaining and knowing that you have to embrace vulnerability to be able to be an agent of change. So I talked about how it's important to look at your community and say, how can I affect change, and not wanting to or needing to stay in a bubble in order to do that. So I thank you very much for listening to me today, and I'm very grateful for all the support and love that I've received up until now. Thank you. Any questions?
So does your research carry over not just with Johns Hopkins, but let's say Mayo Clinic? Where's a place that I had worked in the past, knowing that they had phenomenal research with cancer patients and oncology?
So we do a lot of collaborations with various institutions. I have friends that used to work at the Mayo, and so we still have connections. But in terms of being able to get tissue or samples, absolutely, we get that from other outside institutions as well. Yep. Collaboration is key.
I know you said that you are the only black female.
No, only black pediatric, not even female or male, just
Oh,
black
really?
pediatric
Oh my goodness.
neuro-oncologist.
Okay. Pediatric neuro-oncologist, right? And so do you think that it was like particularly difficult for you to get where you were? Because I know that there's only like 33 black female neurosurgeons in the country, and I want to be a neurosurgeon. And so was it harder for you to get where you were?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
The long answer is you can do it.
Thank you.
Just a quick question.
And we need you to do it.
Are there any opportunities for students to start working like today at the IHS, at the institute?
NIH?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So please go on the NIH website. Well, I'll see if we can circulate the link. But there's a specific website called OITE. You can type that in, NIH OITE. And OITE stands for the Office of Intramural Training and Education. Every summer, they allow high school, college, and even graduate students to come and do research at the NIH. And because we have 27 ICs, you can do research in any one of those 27 ICs. If you're interested in the eye, they have the National Eye Institute. If you're interested in certain type of cancer, you can come to the Cancer Institute. If you're interested in the brain, so NINDS. So all these different 27 institutes look for bright minds, youth that want to be able to answer questions, are happy to be involved in laboratory research, clinical research, or both, or even be on the medical arts side. I mean, we have various kind of internship summer programs. Additionally, I've had people in my lab, actually Dr. Dowdge's daughter came and spent a whole year with me to do research in the lab and do some clinical research. So they have it where if people want to take a gap year or some time in between starting graduate school or not quite sure what they want to do next, they have an IRTA or a post-bac IRTA program where they accept recent graduates from undergrad to come do research. So please check out the NIH website to see what opportunities there are.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, just a quick question. It's a curiosity question in terms of your the research design that you showed with the catheter going to the directly to the brain. Is there a danger then of direct delivery of drugs, like a low dose to the brain instead of
Right. So people
oral?
always ask that. It's a great question because if we're going to open the BBB, what if bad things get in there? So we also make sure that we watch for that. So signs of infection or signs of inflammation. Because we're opening it for a short period of time, that risk is low. And we're just super cautious to make sure that that's not an issue. For this regadenoson trial that I talked about, none of these patients had infection, none of them had fever, none of them showed signs of inflammation in that regard. But that is something serious. We do have to take that into consideration.
So I had another question to follow up what that young man behind me was saying. Now, with the positions that you have, are you looking for strictly MD or doctoral, or would that be open to like PAs, for instance? Because that's the route I plan on going down myself.
Yeah, PA, we need PAs, more PAs, definitely. It's all dependent on what your area of focus are. So we have surgical practices, so just like I stated, the neurosurgeon is the one that cuts out the tumor and has, that places those catheters. So they have opportunities in the different surgical fields if you're interested in being a PA in the surgical field. We also have specialists, cardiologists, oncologists, whatever else. I would take the time and look, but experience and exposure really sets you up to say, you know what, I like this field of medicine and I don't like this field of medicine. So I always push for more exposure, regardless if you're getting your PA, your NP, your MD, whatever. If you're interested in it, please just business, whatever. Exposure really makes a difference.
I think your 2 out of 5 success is really not that bad as it looks. I'm sure you must have considered pharmacogenetic causes of the variability.
Yeah, we didn't go into that level of detail because how the clinical trial was written was that we needed to have 60% or higher in a majority of patients before we would progress to even enroll the trial to be more than just 5 patients. Because we didn't meet that cutoff, it kind of was like, we're done with this one. Let's explore other drugs.
Because
So,
no drug is 100% efficacious.
absolutely, absolutely. But how we could have progressed with this drug and this trial was if both of those patients were around 50, 60%, then we would have expanded it. But seeing as though we didn't get that, then we said, let's look at other agents. And so that's what my lab and my clinical research is really focused on. What other agents can transiently open the BBB so we can increase either TMZ or some other drug from getting into the brain?
Hello there. So the larger theme of this conversation or the conference, the American Dream Reconsidered, yesterday there was a panel that talked about what is the new American Dream. And the conclusion was really access to security. And as part of that access to personal security, it is access to things such as education, healthcare, right to work. On that topic, what would you say is perhaps the biggest barrier that keeps individuals today in having access to healthcare, but seeing themselves represented like you in the field itself and profession?
Oh, that's good. I don't think it's just one thing. It's multiple things in terms of barriers. Having the support system. There's certain things that I see that it's just like, this is common sense. How come it's not there? I can give a personal experience. So my mom went through her journey as a cancer patient. And there were times throughout her journey where I said, well, how come they didn't tell you about this? Why, as a cancer doctor, am I telling and educating you about this, but your own doctor, your own support team? So information and education are key, because a lot of times as patients, the patients don't have all the information they need to be able to make the decision on what treatment option is best. Additionally, support and support staff. I think that makes a difference. When you go to the doctor's office, if the support staff at the front desk are not receptive to what you have going on in your condition, and they're just like, next, then you're not going to be able to get the right trajectory in terms of treatment and what comes next for you. So I sometimes feel like there's a lot of rushing that goes on in the clinical sphere that we don't think about the humanism of the patient. So it's facts, it's about support, and it's about dollars. So the last thing is money. Are we pouring into the right places so that people feel supported and they know where they're going? So I was my mother's advocate, patient advocate. I didn't sign up for that, but just because of all my knowledge, I was there for her. I then looked at other friends, family, non-known people, and looked to see they didn't have advocates. My mom's cancer had gone to her brain, so she wasn't thinking as clearly. How many other of my patients who have brain cancer primarily, or for any other diseases or disorders, really need a patient advocate for them to say, hey, that's not so right. So the support system, the facts, and the money, I would say are the 3. That's just off the cuff. That was good. That was good.
Hello. Thank you for your story. Talking about support made me think of a question based on your personal story at the beginning. I was struck by the number of relocations that you had to go through every 2 to 4 years, a new site, a new town, a new city. What can you tell us about the support that you received during those relocations and what you learned from mentors and sponsors about making that possible?
Yeah. I have an awesome husband. He was my boyfriend at the time and then fiance, so I'm just so grateful for his love and support. I remember working long hours during residency and just feeling so tired coming off call. And there was a time, hopefully I don't make you guys squeamish, but I needed to take a shower because I was post-call, and I was like, I need you to wash me. Nothing sexual, don't try to do anything, just wash me. Like, I'm just that tired, I don't feel like using the loofah. So just having that level of support, not all of you would have that, but just thinking about when you go to move to a different town, state, who is going to be there, who's going to be your grounding, and who's going to be able to make the dinner potentially if you're too tired, or order out, or be able to know where things are staples. So at least having one of those people, and so some of them may just be your colleagues, your fellow trainees with you, but try to identify that early. And when you go for your interview process and you see who your mentors or sponsors can potentially be for those programs, say, you know what, he seems like, or she seems like, or they seem like a stand-up type of individual where I could probably go to them and maybe pour into them if I have something personally going on, because you're gonna need that, and it's gonna happen, and that you're a human being that goes through human being experiences. So I would say that, just kind of starting to identify where your support system can lie before you even go to that new town or city. Definitely look up the weather. You know, are you going to be in this Chicago windy? What's your hair going to look like when you get there? That kind of superficial things that me and my petty pursuits also explored. Thank you all so, so much. My water. I get my water.